السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Oman Arab Bank guests, good evening and welcome to the second edition of OAB Connect. We are truly honored to have you here today. As Oman continues on its mission for economic diversification, smaller and medium enterprises are unsurprisingly starting to grow in prominence. They are the main driver of any country looking to diversify its revenue streams, especially for a country such as ours that was previously heavily dependent on a singular natural resource. Helping SMEs grow and succeed is vital and something we at Oman Arab Bank strive to do. Thankfully, recent technological advancement and smart solutions provide us with all the tools and avenues we need to provide to these budding companies with innovative new solutions and faster, more time-efficient services. And this is exactly why we have gathered here today, to learn how we can effectively leverage modern technology to help grow the SME market, helping them reduce costs, maximize their revenue potential, and ensure their long-term success. To go into more details on the topic, please join me in welcoming on the stage Mr. Rashad Al-Musafir, the CEO of Oman Arab Bank. Please welcome him to the stage. Here. Yep.
ورحمة الله وبركاته. أصحاب السمو، أصحاب المعالي، أصحاب السعادة، اسمحوا لي ببتدي الكلمة بالإنجليزي لأن عندنا ضيوف قد تفوتهم بعض الألفاظ بالعربي. Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I am happy to see here many familiar faces that we have seen before during our previous Oman Arab Bank Connect. This is our second edition of Oman Arab Bank Connect, the event that we like to present to the community to upgrade and share some knowledge on the field of technology. This event is in particular interest to us. You see, we at Oman Arab Bank have always seen it as our core responsibility not only to enhance our business and add value to the banking sector, but also contribute to Oman as a whole. We believe innovation is a national economic priority that is fundamental to all our organizations' growth and success. The digital landscape continues to change so rapidly, disrupting the way we do business. Today, we are extremely fortunate to have technology at our fingertips that just 2 decades ago would have been deemed improbable. Did you know that, according to the statistics published by the Telecom Regulatory Agency in Oman, in 2013, we used an average of 600 megabytes per month on mobile broadband. In 2018, only 5 years later, that number has increased to 2.2 gigabytes per month. The growing popularity of technology, such as artificial intelligence, open banking, blockchain technologies, extended reality, and analytics are incredible tools that can completely revolutionize the banking and business landscape. There are many evident benefits of these technologies. Businesses that innovate are twice as likely to create jobs than those that don't. Innovative businesses are also significantly more likely to be more productive and profitable than those that don't. Innovative companies tend to enjoy revenue, improved customer service, reduced cost, and a competitive edge. I want to share with you a few stories which share with you a powerful idea, how powerful ideas operate. 1 year ago, we launched a new innovative platform, the Oman Arab Bank Innovation Hub, where we enrolled students, fintech companies, and our employees. We got over 350 participants who competed to deliver innovative proof of concept around specific banking themes. Out of the winning teams, 9 students who were the finalists got an opportunity to join Oman Arab Bank for a 6-month internship program targeted to develop their ideas and hone their skills and knowledge and launch the solutions in the market. I'm pleased to inform you these teams succeeded and graduated last month. Bashair was a chemical engineering student who had no background in banking or coding or even application developments. Little did she know that 6 months later, she would develop a new mobile banking 2.0 by simply building all her ideas into our journey. Bashair is here, I believe. Bashair? The flashlights are in my eyes, so I can't see. Saqar was still completing his studies as an IT developer. Little did he know that 6 months later, he would develop a very unique data storage architecture with enhanced security and efficiency parameters, as well as one of the most innovative solutions that we will be launching to the market in the next few days. And Saqar is also here. Saqar, raise your hand. It all started with one idea that they had presented to us. We saw an opportunity and we took a bold decision to develop it into a truly unique ecosystem that will enhance our customers' banking experience. With this in mind, we wanted to create a knowledge-sharing environment from which we can benefit all and innovate with the intent and meaning. The end result was the launch of Oman Arab Bank Connect just under a year ago, an event that aims to bring international thought leaders and futurists to Oman to share their success stories with us, drive innovation, and create value for our community. The last event we organized was incredibly successful, thanks to the quality of the speakers and the positive feedback we received from everyone. We are proud to be in a position to continue to create value once again by hosting the second Oman Arab Bank Connect event this year in 2019. This evening, we wanted to highlight how innovations are changing the way we live, the way we do work, and the way we do business. We have to start the innovation journey at a very early age and encourage innovative thinking as early as possible. Oman Arab Bank had sponsored Al-Fadl School near Nizwa. They have a highly advanced robotics lab and have set the standards for inspiring the youth. They have done so under the sound leadership of Aisha Aslami. Thank you, Aisha, for attending here. In her own words, and I quote, "We need to support our communities and inspire our youth. We can only do that by setting an example." Bاتريك, who has also started young and became successful at an early age, is our next speaker. He was selected as one of the 30 most influential people under 30, much younger than I am, by Forbes magazine. He has been known to enjoy the CCH, some terminology that most of you might not understand if you're not in the right age group. It's, remind me, chicken, cheese, and hot dogs. Thank you. In one of the famous petrol stations in MQ, well known as Hawasna. His youth, he has spent the last years here in Oman completing his education in ABA. Welcome, Bاتريك, back to Oman. Jokes aside, he has been and is one of the foremost experts in the industry. Based in Zurich, Switzerland, Patrick is the CEO and founder of Taylor AG, a company established in 2018. It aims to revolutionize lending to small businesses and build technology that allows business owners to get financing tailored to their needs. Even before founding Taylor, Patrick was already an established name in the world of mobile banking, having worked as the head of business development, head of store, and product manager at Numbers, the company behind the leading mobile banking application in Germany. Before that, he was the CEO and founder of Student Translate, which he developed whilst in university. He sold it in 2012. As a result of his experience in the industry, we believe that the knowledge he will share with us today will shed some new lights and thoughts on technology. That's why we have OAB Connect, to bring people together. Please help me welcome at the stage Mr. Patrick.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you very, very much for the fantastic introduction. It's a great honor for me to be back here tonight. On the one hand, as some of you, well, all of you now have heard, I did grow up here in Oman. I lived here until the age of about 17, 18, and obviously I loved it here. So it's a great opportunity for me also to come back to talk about two things, or something that I'm very passionate about in a place that I'm very passionate about, talking about innovation, talking about technology. I love to do that, and I am very happy to have been invited here by OAB to be able to do this today. So thank you. About my company a bit more in detail, what we do. So what Taylor does is that we give small business loans online to German small businesses. Normally, or the problem that we solve is that in Germany, if a business applies for a loan because they need a new tractor or a new machine or to finance a new order, this takes about 2 months to process. Now, obviously, those of you that are business owners know that if you have to wait 2 months because your customers are waiting or because you need a new machine because something is broken, that's obviously not that great. So what we did is we looked at this process, we saw where are things still manual, where are things still paper-based, and what could we do better. So we basically, thank you. So we basically took this process and digitalized and automated it so that now, instead of it taking 2 months, with us it takes about 10 minutes for the user to get their offer, and the loan is paid out in 1 to 2 business days. So this is a big benefit, obviously, to the customer, but also a big benefit to the bank because it's possible for them to get customers faster, easier, and smoother. Now, how exactly in detail we do that is not that important for today's discussion, but what is important and what is interesting is the learnings that we have gained because of our position in the market. Right? So on the one hand, we're a technology company, so innovation, as we're talking about today, is for us central to what we do. But on the other hand, our target market is business owners, SMEs. Most of our customers are smaller German firms that have revenues of about 5 to 20 million euros a year, so really smaller businesses. So what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about the topic of innovation, about the opportunities and chances that innovation are going to bring us based on what has happened in the last 15 or 20 years and what we can expect from the future. The two really key messages that I want to bring across are two things. The first one, as you've heard today, there are so many new technologies, so many new developments here in Oman and everywhere in the world. But basically the first thing is change is coming faster than you think. And the second thing, there has never been a better time to either start your own company or to innovate inside your own company. And I believe that this is a truly important topic to discuss because I think many people don't realize yet how fast these things are changing and how big that these changes are going to be. I speak a lot, for example, to German business owners, and I see that they don't quite see yet how quickly the industry is changing. They don't see the power of some of these innovations that were mentioned today already, things like the blockchain, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency. So that's what I'm going to talk to you in general about today. And to start doing this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go into just some examples about how innovation and innovative companies have impacted some industries and some sectors that all of us interact with probably on an almost daily basis. So let's start by looking at something really, really straightforward, an industry that we all know and interact with. And the first industry or the first sector that we're going to look at is the retail industry. Right? So the retail is basically the sale of goods and services, or goods mainly to consumers. And it's, as I said, probably the industry or the sector that touches most of our lives every single day. Everyone needs to go and buy food, everyone needs to buy clothes, and most people, for example, need to buy a new iPhone quite regularly or whenever the newest one comes out. So it's something that we're all involved in. 20 years ago, in most of the world, shopping was done offline. If you needed to buy some new clothes, you would get into your car, you would drive down to the shops, you would pay for it, and that would be the transaction executed. Then, also, around 20 years ago, a bit more now, some very innovative companies started popping up and using a new technology called the internet, and more people started to buy, slowly but surely, things online. Amazon, a company that everyone here has probably heard of, was founded in 1996. And it was really one of the first companies, or one of the first still surviving companies, to take advantage of this trend of more people using the internet and more people having access to this new type of technology. Now, today, to take the United States as an example, 14% of all retail is done online through digital channels that just did not really exist 20 years ago. And e-commerce is a great example of how technology has been used to completely change how an entire section of the market functions. In 2018 alone, $517 billion, which is around 200 billion real, was done completely online in the United States. 20 years ago, as I said, this sum was zero. Then a new technology came along, and now 1 in 6 purchases is no longer made in brick and mortar retail stores, they're made online. Another fantastic example is the hospitality industry. I think it's very fitting. We're sitting in a very beautiful hotel tonight, so Airbnb is a good example to use here. And Airbnb is a great example of how, again, technology has been used to shake up the way that an industry works. Now, Airbnb is basically a platform that allows users to rent out their spare bedrooms via a website or an app. So if you have a guest bedroom and you want to earn some extra money, you can rent that out and people can stay there and pay you to stay there. Or alternatively, if you go to a new city and you don't want to stay in a hotel, you can stay in somebody's house. Now, for hundreds of years, hotels and the hospitality industry functioned more or less in the same way. You bought a building, you filled it with some beds, maybe a restaurant, and you charge people to stay in those beds and in those rooms. Today, Airbnb, a technology company which does not own a single bed or a single hotel or even a single building, has a 19% market share in the United States. Airbnb was founded about 10 years ago. So in 10 years, a company that is using new technologies, new processes, a new business model, managed to completely change the structure of this market. Conrad Hilton, who was the founder of the Hilton hotel chain, he founded the first Hilton hotel in 1913 in Texas. And I'm sure that if you had told him that his biggest competitor in the future would be a mobile app that doesn't actually own any hotels, he probably wouldn't have believed you back then, but here we are now. But let's take a look at another market. We've used 2 examples from the United States, but let's look at one outside the United States, China. Again, 20 years ago, things were very different. Like everywhere else in the world, 20 years ago, if people wanted to go and buy something, you would go to the shop, you would take out your wallet, and you would probably pay in cash for whatever you were buying. Then, about 10, 15 years ago, With the launch of smartphones, with the growth of digital and mobile technologies, people started being able to pay with their phones for things. Today, 54% of all payment transactions in China are made through third-party apps, such as WeChat, Alipay, Samsung Pay, and Apple Pay. Only 21% are made with cash. Keeping in mind, China is a market with 1 billion people. So for 1 billion people, more than half of the transactions that they're doing every single day is done on a mobile app or with a mobile phone that has only been on the market for 15 years, 10 years. And just to put into context also how insanely fast the growth is of these new innovative companies, we can compare Alipay is one of these many mobile payment apps, with Visa. Now, most people here probably have some kind of Visa credit card or a Visa card in their pocket right now. Visa has been around since 1958, and Visa, after about 60 years in business, they have 788 million cards in circulation. Alipay, after 15 years in business, have 900 million users, and they aim to hit 1 billion users soon. Alipay, again, is a technology company that has changed the industry using new processes, new tools, and new technologies that just did not exist 15 or 20 years ago. Now, all of these companies and all of these sectors that I've talked about are examples of new business models, new tools being used, new ways of working, and so on. However, even though these changes are significant, and we hear about these companies every single day in the news, and many of us use these companies every single day, when we compare the size of the market that these companies have touched and the size of the market that they own in relation to the overall global economy, it's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. Their penetration isn't actually that big if you look at it in the global context. The majority of industries in the last 20 years have not been disrupted in the way that Amazon, for example, has disrupted the book-selling industry. And even in those industries that have been disrupted, there are many, many geographic regions or niches that have not yet been disrupted, and even many industries that have been disrupted, but the old players are still the most powerful ones or have the largest market share. If we go back and we look again at the topic of digital retail and retail, we see that digital retail has actually not covered that much. A lot, but not in relative size. Global retail is 25 trillion. About 14% of that is already done online. And this means that more than $20 trillion in sales are still done offline. And these figures here don't include things like B2B sales. They don't include things like enterprise sales, which are, of course, also a type of sales, but have far, far lower digital penetration. And this is especially true if we look at specific geographic markets. So on this graph here, you see two of the world's biggest markets, so retail in LATAM, Latin America, and retail in India. These two little blue lines that you see, or darker blue lines that you see at the top, that's the market share of how many sales transactions are done digitally through e-commerce. So as you can see, trillion-dollar or huge markets, and the majority is still not done through Amazon or through other digital channels. And this is even more true if you go into, as I said, certain niche industries. So in my industry, for example, small business lending in Germany, 20 years ago, as I said, if you wanted a bank loan for your business, you had to go to the bank, fill out a lot of forms, and it would take weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. 20 years ago, 100% of companies did it exactly this way. Now, in 2019, as you can see, 99.5% of companies still do it in the exact same way, and 99.5% of loans are still fulfilled in the exact same way. That 0.5% market share is ours, plus maybe one or two competitors, but the main message being, in 20 years, in an industry that does about 150 to 200 billion in business per year, there's been hardly any change. So on the one hand, in the last 20 years, we've had companies that we hear about all the time that are extremely, extremely innovative, that have popped up and that have innovated and have had really significant impact on huge industries. On the other hand, probably as many people in this room can confirm, There are a very large number of industries, probably the vast majority of industries, and very many geographical regions where this just has not happened yet. There just not has been this kind of startups coming in and shaking up these industries. And going even further, if we look at kind of the industries that we know that have been shaken up, we see that these are generally industries that require low capital investment to break into. They're industries that require low levels of research and development to break into, and they're industries with low regulatory hurdles to get into. Selling books online, like Amazon started off with, does not require a lot of capital or a big research development department or anything like this. It involves taking a new technology and applying it to an industry. Doing what Amazon did with books is much more difficult in industries that have high regulatory hurdles, higher costs, and so on. For example, it's easier to improve the process of selling books by moving that online than it is to improve the process of refining oil, for example, or than it is to improve the process of producing medicine. But today we're in the interesting situation that in many areas, in many cases, these kind of industries with low barriers to entry have already been tackled. If you build today an online bookstore, it's probably going to be quite easy to do. I think we could all agree that it's easy to sell books online today, but you're probably not going to be as successful as Amazon is. If you build a photo sharing app, there's so many tools available online that it's very quick and relatively easy to build another photo sharing app. But you're probably not going to be as successful because there are 1,000 other photo sharing apps online. Now, Benedict Evans, who is a venture capital analyst for one of the world's biggest venture capital firms, and he's responsible for kind of looking at these kind of trends at Andreessen Horowitz, which is a big VC, he calls this effect the end of the beginning. So what this means is that the next 20 years of innovation and the next generation of startups will be focused either on industries that are more difficult and more capital intensive to tackle, or they will be focused on geographic areas that have not yet been tackled so far. Now, this is important for us for two reasons. Firstly, it's because most of us are exactly in these kind of industries or in these kind of areas that have not had kind of Amazon-type companies come in and shake up the way that everything is done in that industry. My industry, the banking industry, where I've worked my whole career, has not really had its banking moment yet. In the last few years, it's kind of come that you have some bigger startups that are shaking things up, but I don't think you could argue that that banking has had the same effect as Uber has had on the transportation industry, for example. And the second reason why this is important for us is because all of these barriers that I mentioned earlier, that there's high capital cost that stops people going into an industry, that there's high technology cost, high research and development cost, high geographic barriers and things like that, all of these barriers are completely disappearing or have started to significantly become smaller and less relevant than they ever have before. So far I've actually spoken about kind of four main barriers that stop someone from going into an industry and that have stopped people from innovating in certain industries up until now. The first that I mentioned a few times, a technology barrier. Today, it is easier to build a high-tech product and cheaper and faster to build a high-tech product than it ever was before. A behavioral barrier. Users are today more open to trying new things and they expect the same level of comfort and convenience in every industry that they are in. There's a barrier to capital, or there was a barrier to capital. Today, there is more opportunities to get an idea funded than there ever were before. And geographic barriers. With the growth of digital technology, the geographic barriers become less and less important because we live in a very digital world. So I'm going to go a bit into these technological barriers and explain why I believe that these barriers are falling down and give you some examples of this. So the first one, technological barriers. This is, in my opinion, almost the most important one of all. In the past, many industries were relatively safe from new people entering because it required a very large upfront technology investment and a high level of technical knowledge to go into a specific industry. And in the past, this was really across the board the case. If you were building a software product or some kind of high-tech project in the late 90s or in the 2000s, it was tough. It was tough to find engineers. There were not many open source tools. You had no, as we have today, digital marketing channels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you had to have your servers downstairs in the cellars, you had to manage these things, so the cost and the time and the human capital of building a high-tech product was very, very high. Today, it's completely different. In the process of building the startups of the last 20 years, because of the cloud revolution and the pace of technological process, it is now possible to access incredible technology faster than ever before and build a high-tech product faster and cheaper than ever before. One funny example, if you go onto Google and you search Twitter clone, you will find hundreds of guides of how to build your own clone of Twitter, which has millions of users. So whereas before, if you wanted to enter an industry, in many cases it was a very high technical challenge. Today, there's a vast variety of tools available for you. Now, my favorite example of this is machine learning. Now, machine learning is really one of the kind of cutting-edge technologies that is a lot of people are talking about at the moment. And it basically means to build an algorithm or a software tool that learns based on data that is input. Okay, so then you put data into the algorithm, and then the more info that you feed it, the smarter it gets, and it's a self-learning system that can give a certain output based on what you want. Now, the pioneers in this sector, if you wanted to do machine learning 20 years ago, you needed extremely knowledgeable staff, probably a team of PhDs and loads of engineers and people to clean and prepare the data and so on and so forth. And today, and we, for example, do this, if I start a startup today in some specific industry and I have a good data set and a good insight into this industry, I can log on to Amazon Web Services and use their machine learning infrastructure out of the box in a matter of minutes for just a few dollars. So there's incredible technology that literally anyone in this room can go to aws.com and access today, no matter where you are, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what data you have. So even something as cutting edge as machine learning is now available to anyone with an Amazon account, or with, there's many other types of technologies just like this that are now available to anyone with a little bit of programming knowledge and a little bit of money. So the technological barrier to entry is reduced significantly compared to just a few years before. The second barrier to entry that has gone, or that has changed significantly, is a behavioral barrier. There's a very famous tweet, I don't know originally who it's from, but it basically says, in 1998, parents told their children, don't get into cars with strangers. In 2008, they said, don't meet people from the internet alone. And in 2019, you have Uber, so you order yourself a stranger from the internet to get into a car alone with. Yeah. So as you can see, behavior has changed because a lot of these new services, products, and apps that are coming out into the market. When Airbnb was, for example, founded, they actually almost went bankrupt because they didn't find an investor that believed that someone would be willing to pay to sleep in another person's house, or that someone would rent out their spare bedroom. Airbnb is about to file their IPO with a valuation of, I think, $10.5 billion. And they published this email that they got from one of their early investors. Most important, I guess, is the last line. The potential market opportunity did not seem large enough for our required model. They have a 20% market share today in the United States. So again, with all these business processes, with all these new technologies that have launched, people are really changing their consumer behavior, and they're much more open to doing new things and trying new things than they ever were before. Far more than this, they're not just open to trying them, but they're expecting this improved behavior. If I'm able to shop online and order Uber by a phone and book my hotel by a phone, then I want this level of convenience and ease in every service that I try. And this applies across all industries. If you look at, for example, N26 and Live, you will see a completely new, two completely new types of bank, or two banks, one type, that work different from any other banks in the world. Now, both N26 and Live are mobile banks. That means these are banks that don't have branches, they don't have a sales team, they don't have ATMs or anything like this. These are banks that the users can only access via their mobile phones. N26 is a German company, a German bank based in Berlin, and Live is from Dubai. Now, as I said, both of these banks, no branches, no sales team, no ATM. So completely different process of interacting and dealing with your financial life than has been the case in the past. They've completely redefined the way that people manage their finances, the process that people use to manage their money. And both of these banks are extremely successful. N26 is growing by 10,000 customers every single day. 10,000 customers every single day. And Liv also, when they launched, had thousands of customers from day one. So again, what this means for you, customers have a willingness to change, customers are open to new processes, and customers are expecting this level of innovation and drive in how they are dealt with. Next, the third barrier that is gone is access to capital. I've spoken a few times today about how in the past it was focused on going onto industries that required a low capital investment upfront to get into. This just is not the case anymore. Today, it is easier to get funded and to get your idea funded than it ever has been at any time in the past, probably. The startups of the last few years have shown investors that it is possible to make massive returns by digitalizing, by using technology and innovating in industries such as transportation, retail, hospitality, and travel. But there are, as I've said, of course, hundreds of other industries that have not yet been touched. So if you come now and you can show an investor that you have the idea for the Airbnb of shipping or Airbnb of the oil industry or something like that, you can get hundreds of millions of dollars of fundraising, okay? The concepts are proven to investors and they are hungry for investment. As you can see here, from 2010 to 2019 alone, the size of venture capital investments has increased by a factor of 5. So if you have an idea, you can get the money for it. And finally, the final topic, geographic barriers. With the widespread of internet and mobile technology, geographic barriers are becoming less and less relevant when it comes to innovation. Today, almost half of the world's population is online and have access to training, have access to different products, have access to different tools because of this. It's today possible for companies to hire engineers and find customers in any country in the world. And because more and more services are provided digitally, this effect is compounding more and more over time. To put this into context for you in my example, so my company has around 20 employees now. We are legally and officially a Swiss company with our headquarters based in Zurich, Switzerland. But in Zurich, we actually only employ 4 people. All of our engineers sit in different countries, America, Poland, Bulgaria, and the Philippines. Our marketing team are all Germans, but they are split between Spain and Thailand. We have sales staff in almost every state in Germany. And although we're a Swiss company, we don't have a single Swiss customers. We only deal with German customers. So we're a completely decentralized company, right? And this gives us a huge advantage over our competitors. I can go to almost any market as long as I fulfill the regulatory requirements, and I don't need to open any branches, I don't need to open any offices. We just put up a new website with, instead of .com, we put .de or .fr or whatever country that we want to go to. And it gives me a huge advantage as well, because I can hire pretty much anyone in the world. Wherever I find the best people, I can hire them. And in case any of you were thinking, oh, this is just a thing for small startups like Patrick's startup, this is a growing trend. You have massive billion-dollar companies that are doing this. My favorite example is GitLab. So GitLab is a company that builds software for other software companies. They've got hundreds of employees, right? And they recently, or a while ago, sold their San Francisco office because they just didn't need it anymore. Everyone works from wherever they happen to be. And this is a company that has grown in value massively, and they have customers all over the world. Nothing is stopping them from going to any country in the world. Valuation of $2.75 billion. And there's many more. And to be honest, it's also something that more and more people are open to doing, that people want to try. The flexibility and being able to work from wherever you are. So it's also, of course, a nice advantage for employees, and it goes without saying for employers. You can go online today and hire a whole engineering team from a website like freelancer.com to build your company, to build your startup, to innovate, and so on. So, to summarize, from a technology perspective, it is easier than ever to build a technology product. It's cheaper than ever, it's faster than ever. From a user perspective, it's easier than ever to convince users to use new processes and new tools and new apps and new anything. And they expect new things, they expect innovation. From a capital perspective, it's easier than ever to get the funding, to fund your innovation, to fund your project, to build up your company. And from a geographic perspective, we are living more and more in a borderless world, which means you can get customers anywhere you want. And these are all factors that are only happening in the last few years. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, many of the things that I have been talking about now, all of these barriers, all of these changes that have happened to these barriers, would not have been the case. These changes are happening just now. And what this means is that everything that we've seen so far, with Google, with Amazon, with Facebook, with all these crazy startups, it's really just the beginning. Because there are hundreds and hundreds of other industries and other areas that have not yet been touched, but are now able to be touched by this type of innovation. The last 20 years were spent basically setting the groundwork for all the innovation that is going to happen in the next 20 years. The barriers that stop people from innovating are gone. So what? So what does this mean for you, if you're a manager, an entrepreneur, a business owner in this room today? Firstly, it is a fantastic opportunity. Irregardless if you're an entrepreneur, a business owner, an employee, anything like this, the fact that these barriers are gone is a fantastic opportunity for you to innovate. Never before has it been easier to innovate internally inside a company. As we've seen today, there's so many programs and so many opportunities for people to do these things, and now is the best time to do it. And the existing companies have huge advantages over any kind of startups. You have the customer relationships, you understand your users, you have a brand, you have often more money than the startups, and you have a reputation in the market. These are barrier to entries that are not going anywhere. So this, combined with the fact that these other barriers are gone, is a fantastic opportunity for every business. And there are many, many very big and very old companies that have seen this thing and are innovating like crazy. It's not just Oman Arab Bank that's innovating, there's also also other ones. Perfect example of this is, for example, Goldman Sachs. It's one of the oldest and biggest investment banks in the world. They now have more engineers than Facebook does. Yeah? And this is a bank that's hundreds of years old, or at least 100 years old. They also recently completely restructured a part of their bank because they saw that they had a lot of opportunities to go borderless and with new technologies. They launched a new branch called Marcus, and Marcus is the first retail bank that Goldman has launched in many years. And it's basically kind of a fully digital bank where users can get savings account and loans and cards and things like that. They launched in one country. They have a completely decentralized team. They're using all of these technologies that we talk about. And it's a huge success. They have something like 50,000 customers just when they started. Shell is another company that I think together even with PDO is doing massive innovations in this area. They've, for example, working with Amazon, using the machine learning tools that we talked today, maybe a bit better machine learning tools than the ones that are publicly available, but working with Amazon to using these technologies that we talked about to identify, for example, if an oil pipeline is going to break before it breaks so that they can proactively repair things that need to be repaired, right? 10, 20 years ago, this probably would not have been feasible, but now as the cost and access to technology has gone down, this is a huge benefit for these companies. Now, in the next few years, someone who understands your industry will also realize that there are very few barriers to going in and doing the things that we've talked about today. And they will come and they will try and take up the market share. Whether they watch my presentation or not, it will become clear that it is easier to hire people, easier to get customers online, easier to get funding. It's possible to build better, more technical solutions. And they will be inspired, of course, by seeing what is happening in all the other industries. So right now, really, it's a bit of a race. Can the existing market participants innovate before the startups can scale? So I cannot tell you how to innovate in your particular industry because unless your industry is banking, I probably don't know very much about it. But what I can guarantee for you is that the 4 barriers that have gone down are a fantastic opportunity for you. And I can guarantee that the next Uber or the next Airbnb or the next Amazon will be in one of the industries that so far has not been touched yet because of the barriers that we've talked about. But now that the barriers have gone down, it will be. And because these barriers have gone down, this will come faster and sooner than you expect. So you need to ask yourself today kind of three big questions. 1, what are these new technologies that are available and how can I use them for my business to innovate, to grow my company, to change my processes? 2, how can we rebuild our processes and our services to meet these evolving demands of users in terms of speed, comfort, and price? And thirdly, how can I take advantage of this new borderless digital world? There is no reason why the next Uber shouldn't come from Oman. It doesn't need to be San Francisco. You can equally target any market in the world from right here. And I think that's the future. Every problem, every bit of waste, every inconvenience you see in your industry is faster and easier to solve than ever before. Every problem you see in your business is an opportunity for you to innovate. And because of the reasons I've spoken to, again, easier, cheaper, and faster than ever before. In the end, my key feedback for you, if you own a company, if you are employed at a company, if you're a manager and so on, you need to be continuously innovating and continuously having innovation on your radar. Because if you don't, someone else will. And if the topic of innovation is not on your radar and you get too comfortable and stop innovating, you will make quotes like these that will be talked about for a long time to come. So this is a fantastic quote from the CEO of Microsoft in 2007, the year that the first iPhone launched, where he said, "There's no chance that the iPhone is going to get any significant market share. No chance." And this is what happens when you don't focus on innovation. Thank you very, very much for listening. Thank you again to Oman Arab Bank and the entire team, Hilal, Faraz, for inviting me here and for guiding me around. It's been a fantastic pleasure, and I look forward to the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bاتريك Stäuble. That was quite an insightful talk. I would like now to call on stage Ibtisam Al-Khaifi from SIMAT. Ibtisam is an organizational psychologist and founder of SIMAT Human Development Consultancy. She is a mastermind behind the Women Mentoring Program at Oman Arab Bank. Having developed and implemented it, the program was officially launched last week during the Women's Day celebration and is proving hugely successful. Ibtisam will be moderating the Q&A. Ibtisam, the stage is all yours.
Omar, thank you for the introduction. Oman Arab Bank, thank you for inviting me. Patrick, thank you for the insightful,
Thank you.
and everyone, thank you for being here as well.
Thank you.
You for the insightful presentation on how do you apply technology into financing. Welcome to Oman as well. You've grown up here once, and welcome to this forum today. We're doing a question and answer, and then we'll open the forum for everyone to ask. I'm sure many of you are excited with this topic of innovation and technology. Innovation and technology is very important, and as you said, change is not only coming soon, it's already here, knocking our doors. So I think organizations need to keep that in mind and increase, for them to increase the market share or maintain it at least with this very competitive market that we have today. So it's very impressive on how you have created this online tool, simplifying a process that might take 4 months on few minutes. Innovation is all about having an idea, innovative idea, and transform it into a commercial forum. So my question to you, from a simple innovative idea, how did you transform it to a commercialized idea and bring about all that financial benefits?
That's a very good question. I think what's always important when you have any kind of idea or a business idea, my recommendation would be get something out and into the hands of the users as quickly as possible. I think I see a lot of entrepreneurs, they make the mistake and they try and think like, how can I make this so that it works for 10 million users and so on. Don't worry about 10 million users, try and get 10 customers first. If you can get it for 10 customers, then you can focus from 10 to getting to 100. When you have 100 customers, you can think about 1,000 and so on. There's this concept of the minimum viable prototype, and what I always try and do is I say, what is kind of the smallest version of this idea that I can build and launch and get to market to get just enough feedback to know what I need to do next, right? You don't have to be kind of building the full thing from day one, because you probably don't even really know what the full thing is from day one. You might have your idea and you might see that the users like a completely different part of it. There's a great example of this. There's a company called Slack, and Slack is one of the biggest chat messenger tools in the world at the moment. And they actually started off as like a game company, and they were building games, and they had like this chat tool inside their games. And then they, I think, didn't do so well as a game company, I guess, or they might still be making games. But when they noticed that their games were working, they saw, but actually we have this really cool chat tool that users seem to love. And then they said, okay, let's focus on the chat tool instead. So your idea might not be the right idea, but launch it and you will get the feedback, and launch it as quick as possible, because the only real feedback is from the customers. Everything else is just academic.
Great, thank you. You've taken us through a number of examples, Amazon, Airbnb, and other examples. Do you think on our time now, is it possible for startups or maybe existing companies that they already have their own innovation departments or innovation initiatives, is it possible they compete with these large organizations?
I think so. I think it's difficult if you're based probably in the exact same geographic region or in the exact same niche as these companies. But I think, as I said, there's still huge amounts of market share that don't belong to Amazon or Uber or whoever. It's definitely harder than if you go into another industry. I think it's much more likely that the next kind of one of these big companies will come from an industry outside of these companies. Even just for the fact that companies like Google and Amazon, these guys are extremely smart, and they tend to buy up any competitors before the competitors get too big. But yeah, I fully believe that anyone can get to the same level and then can compete with them. Another good example of this, for many, many years, people used to say that there's not really much left to do in the field of like video chat, for example, Skype. Right? Skype's been around for 15 years or 10 years or something like this. And then Google came out with Google Hangouts, and it wasn't really a big hit. And then everyone was kind of like, okay, there's not really any space left in the market for these video chats because everyone is using this. And then 3 or 4 years ago, or 1 year ago, there was the IPO. A company called Zoom became profitable in no time. And I mean, it's in the end the exact same product as Skype, which has huge market dominance, already has. But it was just a bit better, a better marketing strategy and stuff like that. And now, you know, everyone is using Zoom all of a sudden. So there's no guarantee that someone is not going to make a better search algorithm than Google, or a better type of online experience than Amazon, and be able to take away their market share. So anything is possible.
So how can companies do that? I'm stealing your last question in the presentation about companies using the technology and what you've called specifically borderless digital world.
Yeah.
How can they use it to make sure they're actually innovative?
I think the biggest benefit that I see of this is that there is now, depending on what service you provide, of course, but there are just far less barriers where you can grow your market share. Right, so if you're providing a service and maybe you're here producing some goods in Oman, there's nothing stopping you from selling that online to consumers in wherever, in Switzerland, where I come from. So the opportunities are much bigger, and I think what's really important is to recognize these opportunities and invest in these opportunities, and especially, for example, that leadership of the companies understand these opportunities, which I think that's the big one.
I think so many companies are already taking these initiatives
Exactly.
on board.
Yeah.
Just how to make it really happen through maintaining, the believing in that idea and just make it happen at the end of the day.
Yeah.
There are some concerns I think we've heard in our conversations even before around does digitalization mean we are losing some jobs? Does it mean are we going to replace it with technology? I know the answer is no, and most of you know the answer is no. But it would be great to hear it from you. How do you see it differently, and how is it going to create even more jobs, more sophisticated, using human intellect into more objective roles?
Yeah. So I think the big misconception often is that that you digitalize a process and then you don't need these people anymore or something like that. I think that's generally not the way that I've seen organizations approach this, or that it kind of translates into reality. We've had a good example is, for example, if a company automates certain processes, like documentation processes that the sales team has to do. If now the sales team are spending, they have 20% more free time, so to speak, that doesn't mean you need to fire 20% of the sales team. It means that the sales team has 20% more capacity to do sales. So I think these type of things are much more of an opportunity rather than kind of a risk that you have to have people to lose jobs. I think also historically speaking, in many cases, there's many industries that are not around anymore today, or jobs that have changed, or jobs that don't exist anymore. But that doesn't necessarily mean that these people kind of stay unemployed for the rest of their lives. Like the role changes, the job changes and stuff like that, and people change with the needs of the market or the needs of the company.
Yeah, I totally agree. And each era have a different type of jobs for everyone.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'll have one question, and then I'll open the floor for anyone to ask any questions. I'm sure you have many of them. There is a concern around data privacy and data protection, consumer protection when it comes to using technology. And in a market such as Oman, which is a highly regulated market, how can companies still innovate and maintain the risk of maintaining the data and the privacy of the consumers?
Yeah. I think, in my opinion, there's no other way to do it, because I don't think kind of data privacy or data security is something that you can compromise on. What I do think is very important is that it should be something that has, like, the regulations and the laws have to be developed between the regulator, the consumers, and the market participants, the companies like that. Because then if everyone is bought into how it works and all the feedback is there, then you get much more realistic policies that are possible to implement. But I think in no case can you compromise on data privacy, and I think that it's also very important that the regulator is kind of putting these laws out there, so that to make sure that everyone is playing by the rules and to make sure that these rules do work. But yeah, fundamentally, I don't think that there's a trade-off between innovation and data privacy, because data privacy should be a kind of a basic level, or same with data security, for example. Yeah.
Right. Any questions from the audience?
We can't really see the audience.
The lighting is quite strong. Can we pass on the mic?
Thank you, Patrick and Sam. My question is, we have people that are more creative and people that are less creative. So there may be a perception that if I'm less creative, then I'm not going to be innovative and I'm not going to be able to come up with new ideas. You know, there are much smarter people out there. How true is that, and how do you move people from one side to the other?
I don't specifically think it's I know that there are many people who say like, oh, I'm not so creative, but I think just, you know, as anyone, certain people have strengths in the different areas. So someone who might not be creative in business process development might be a very creative computer engineer, for example. So I think it's, what I've seen in the past that is very successful is that it's kind of the responsibility of the managers of these persons to know and to identify what is the skill set of these people, where can they innovate, where can they bring the most value to the company and bring them in that area. And I think it's extremely important to have, you know, across the company, people getting access to innovation programs, to new ideas and stuff like that, because there might be someone who thinks that they're not creative, but then they just see a new type of, a new field that they didn't even know existed before, or a new process that they didn't know existed before, and then only then realize, aha, this process or this idea is exactly my kind of area that I want to focus on. So I guess exposure is a big thing, exposure to different ideas, exposure to different thoughts, processes, books, whatever you want to, however you want to define that. And of course, then also having kind of a management structure or a human resources process in place to make sure that these people their skills are going to the right area in terms of innovation, in terms of developing these ideas.
And I think, as you said, it starts with a problem. So I'm sure all of us in our organizations, we have so many obstacles. So sometimes innovative ideas are actually coming from these
Absolutely,
problems, basically. And I'm sure every employee has something to add if they have the space, and then they're supported to do so.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for a very lovely presentation. And thank you, Ibtisam, for moderating. Patrick, my question to you, I guess, you know, you have a thriving company. You are very young, mashallah. You have made success. In your opinion, you target the financial sector. So mostly these are banks, established companies. They have all the money. I don't think they have a constraint when it comes to money. But you said something in your presentation. You said, can the incumbent innovate? So from what you have encountered, from your experience, what do you think is the main hindrance when you say mostly all the banks now and the financial service providers in Europe, they don't innovate and they don't go digital? So what do you think is the main hindrance? What is really preventing them from really crossing that hurdle? Yeah. And I want you have worked with few companies. I mean, that's my second question to you. Yeah. What is the impact of when you have digitized their process? What is the most obvious, ramification of that? Is it more profits? Is better customer service? What do really they gain from doing it? Do they get ahead of the competition? Yeah. Please, you share your experience in that.
So regarding the first question, I think the reason why a lot of the, let's say, incumbent banks, especially in Europe, why they're not able to compete with startups is generally a leadership problem. Probably every bank in Europe has more money and more staff and more whatever than any of the startups that they're competing with against. The biggest problem is, in many cases, not in all cases, there's very many very innovative banks, but in some cases you see that you have, for example, a board of directors or a management team or even the middle management that just doesn't understand what does digitalization mean, what is innovation, and then oftentimes I've seen this several times, in fact, you have a scenario where, you know, a bank will say, this year we're going to digitalize, and then they redesign their website, and then they're like, okay, we've digitalized, and nothing changes after that. And this, in the end, although you probably have very competent people, you have a huge budget that could potentially be available, if the leadership doesn't understand and isn't able to push that through to the organization, then all of that doesn't really matter in the end, right? So I think their biggest adversaries of the incumbents are themselves, so to speak. You have very many banks that have, for example, have understood this, and they you know, from the top board director all the way down to the bottom of the employees, understand what is innovation, understand how important this is to the success of the company, and then live this. And these are the ones that are succeeding, that are growing. Regarding the second question, I think the biggest benefit that I've seen is, I think that the one that the banks are usually most happy with, in my experience, are cost cutting, because they have less costs, they can do more with less money. This then kind of indirectly plays out in things like better customer service and higher profit margins, of course. But the most common feedback that I hear from banks is that you know, we now have 10% less admin work, and admin work is costing us 1,000 hours a week or something like that. So thank God we don't have to do this anymore, and it saved us money. And yeah, but I think in the end, all of that is kind of not as important, because I think the most, let's say, satisfying end result is that it's better for the customer, and if it's better for the customer, then the company profits more or is more successful in the long run. But yeah, that isn't always what they're most happy about. So yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Patrick. With the presentation, what you have given on digitalization, I want to understand, how is it going to impact on the education? Because now people learn the traditional way of education to get good jobs in the bank or in bigger corporate companies on a higher post. Now, connect with this, the employment, as you said, cost cutting. It's employment. How will the country tackle on this?
I think for the country, it's I mean, in terms of education, I think everything that we've seen here, especially with this, you know, concept of a kind of a borderless economy and more digitalization, it's a fantastic opportunity, because it's every person in here today can go online and learn computer science or engineering from Harvard professors if they wanted to. Well, before, you know, to hear a lecture from a Harvard professor for most of us would have been completely impossible. Today, you can learn any skill, any engineering branch. You could visit almost any university course, no matter what your background is. All you need, or what your previous education is, you just need an internet connection, basically. So the potential for how much you can learn is much higher. The potential to broaden your horizons is much higher. The potential of different tools, etc., for learning that you have access to is much higher. And this, to answer the second part of your question, yes, you know, of course there will be structural changes to the economy if more jobs get digitalized and stuff like that. But also, if things are changing and people do need to learn new skills, they are now much better able to learn these new skills than ever before. I think if these changes do happen, of course the government has to make sure that you know, people are supported if they need to learn new things and stuff like that. But the opportunities for learning and the impact on education is very positive in my opinion, because you have now unlimited knowledge at your fingertips if you have an iPhone in your hand, for example. I mean, I'm for example, a self-taught programmer. I never did a programming course in my life. Everything that I know, I've learned from YouTube, from different courses online, and I've never paid for any of it, because it's all out there for free, and this is a fantastic opportunity for anyone.
One more question.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much, Patrick, for the presentation. Just a question I want to ask in regards to what was asked before. The digital world against the standard normal brick world. You were talking about the financial world here. You know, the traditional banking against digital banking. Everyone's moving into the into the digital banking, but there's a couple of banks moving into digital banking that didn't make it out there. Like take in the UK in the, I think 2000, early 2000, there's a bank called Kahoot Bank, you know, oh, is it Kahoots or Coots? I'm not even know how to pronounce it, sorry, I apologize. It didn't make it, it failed. why would you think that would fail? And is it the timing? Is it maybe people, something personal like finance, would still like to meet would like to still meet the traditional people and speak to someone instead of to a telemarketing person?
Yeah.
So I just want to know from your point of view.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know the specific case, but I mean, it could be. I think building these fully digital banks is something that was very difficult even 5 years ago. So these barriers that I talked about, when I started working at Numbers, this was in 2014, and we had also built a mobile banking app. And when we started and we launched this app, we found it extremely difficult to get people to trust us because they didn't know us and stuff. And in the beginning, all of the questions we were getting were about, why should I, give you my bank information? Why should I trust you with their money? 3 years later, when we were getting new customers, even if they hadn't heard about us before, they just didn't care so much anymore because I think people are so much more open now to trying new apps, trying new technologies. So I think a big factor for sure is 5, 6, or 10 years ago, the mentality to kind of using new processes and services wasn't the same as it is today. So that might have been one factor. The other factors is often what I see with banks, or what probably many people here who work in banks know, IT-wise with a bank, one of the biggest sources of frustration, especially with older banks, is the IT system. And I've also heard of cases where banks try to digitalize and it doesn't work because they have 16 different IT systems that need to talk to each other, and they don't dare to rip it all out and start from scratch. So they try and add system number 18 or 19 or 20 to digitalize, and that often doesn't work very well. But yeah, there's many reasons. I'm sure there will be many more banks who don't manage to digitalize, be it for everything from bad leadership to bad technology to going to the wrong markets. But that's life.
I think you've talked about the barriers, like the capital barriers, technology barriers, behavioral barriers. What really attracted my attention, as I am an organizational psychologist, I'm all about behaviors, how the new technology actually changing the behaviors. So I remember a talk by Steve Jobs when he said, we don't look for what customers want. We actually go ahead of what they want in the future. And we've seen technology have actually changed behavior and changed conception around how safety is done, how do I expect my service to be delivered to me. Yep. So that's very interesting. Yeah. And if you want to say anything about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the also topic we already talked about today, data privacy. I can honestly say probably 6 or 7 years ago, I don't know, I'd never really thought about it before, and I'm sure that it wasn't as prevalent in the media as it is today. And now suddenly, in the last 2 or 3 years, every day it's a topic at every conference and every newspaper and every online blog. Data privacy is a big issue. So this is a whole kind of a new value that we've started caring about based on the way that the market has developed and the way that technology has developed, that maybe before we didn't care about or didn't realize that it was an issue, or didn't know we needed to care about. And there's many other things that people behave differently now, where they get their ideas, where they decide what to do, that is shaped very much by kind of the change in technology and the new services.
How are we doing with time? Can someone just alert me, because I don't see the organizers? Are we doing good with time? Can we have some more questions? One last question. Okay. Or maybe 2 last questions, because Asma has raised her hand. So the gentleman behind Asma? So Asma has raised her hand for someone else. Wasta.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. Actually, I have two questions. One already has been answered, but I would like to elaborate on behavior. Actually, I saw a lot of apps and applications and software engineers. They go and understand the culture of each area before they apply. And regarding the UK bank, actually, this is where they failed, the name and the culture. Actually, this is a true story, and we studied before. And there is a well-known story about, Davidoff, when they brought the sales would dip down in early 70s. They brought PhD from university to improve the sales. He changed the backing, then they lost everything. Yeah. Anyway, Patrick, I have a question regarding VCs. You mentioned about startups. We are partially in this line of business, and out of 10 startups, almost 1 or 2 they reach basically the growth part, and There's a lot of startups actually fail, but there's nothing wrong with the startups because of timing, the quality, etc. In your case, and you know, in your basically environment, you're still young, and you do in banking. There is a lot of crowdfunding now, and there is a lot of applications working on crowdfunding. Crowdfunding in Oman is not allowed, even though in Middle East, North Africa, still a new concept. But we are trying to develop something in crowdfunding. Do you, in your bank, or when you basically speed up the process of getting the loans in 10 minutes, then in 2 days to disperse the loan, anything on crowdfunding? Because we are trying to help the young people how to come up with ideas, especially for SMEs.
I think there's a lot of potential for crowd lending in certain, or crowdfunding in certain areas, and not as much potential in others. I think in the business that we are, or that I am in, small business lending, I think in this case, it's not a good solution, peer-to-peer lending or crowd lending, because I believe that the crowd, so to speak, or private investors can't as accurately judge a risk of an existing company as a financial institution can, and the way that just the capital markets are set up, it's always going to be cheaper to get money from a large institutional investor or a financial institution than it is to try and onboard 1,000 people who are going to give you one real each at a time. Where I do think crowdfunding is very effective and has a very important role is things like Kickstarter or equity crowdfunding, where you're not really trying to judge the risk of the company and see like how is the credit score of this company, so to speak, but where you're judging them on the value of their idea or on the value of the potential of the product, and where you know this is kind of like a mini venture capital investment and not like, in that sense, a pure financial investment like a peer-to-peer lending investment would be. So a lot of potential, but not in every industry, I would say.
Short questions. The first one is, Swiss company operating in Germany, anything to do with regulations?
No, so it's a funny situation. Although we are a Swiss company, we are regulated by the German regulator because our customers are there. But we actually, one of the big reasons we chose actually Germany was because rather than Switzerland to be our first market in, is because of the European Union. Once we have our product built and we fulfill the German regulations, it's possible for us to go to any other European countries because the regulations are generally quite similar because of the European Union, while Switzerland is not a part of the European Union, for better or for worse. But that makes it very difficult for us, because if we're compliant in Switzerland, that doesn't really help us with any of our neighboring countries. So we decided to focus on Germany first, and the reason we chose Zurich is because I live in Zurich and I like it there.
Okay. My second and last question is, we've talked, I mean, your specialization is in banking. We talked about how difficult it is for the big existing banks to actually go digital, to move into the new age. Do you think it's easier for existing banks to innovate from within and to change? Or do you think it's better for them to create a separate sideline business that is purely new age, that can then be molded into the existing infrastructure because of the capital and everything else that they
It's a very, very good question. I think the reality is that although theoretically it might seem like a good idea to have a separate, completely like breakaway organization, as you know, very many times if you have a merger and acquisitions transaction, or and you acquire another company, it's very, very difficult, I think, to integrate another company. And then if you have kind of these two separate entities, even though they might be the same umbrella organization, bringing one back in later is very difficult. You might as well, in that case, just buy a startup that does it. I think for the fundamental health of the bank, it's better if you can create a culture of innovation internally and innovate internally. There are a lot of banks that have done this, and I think it's probably more conducive to a long-term success of the company if you have a culture of innovation in the actual company, rather than saying those guys have a culture of innovation, but we're not going to do that. And then eventually maybe they, maybe we'll bring them in and take their culture of innovation. So I think it's probably maybe not easier, but more successful in the long run to try and build a culture of innovation internally.
Or maybe a mix of both, because we've seen organizations who have introduced the innovation as a separate entity, but at the same time kind of innovation culture within the organization.
I think this is, so it's extremely important to have, so I guess you should differentiate it somehow, because one of the big problems that you have if you innovate internally, it's often that it's treated like any other kind of project. So you say like you innovated, or you had this and this project to do and you didn't deliver in time, that's not good. It's extremely important to have innovation projects and have these kind of ring-fenced away that okay, they have the resources, but they're like a little mini startup inside the company or a mini hub inside the company. But I think and this is very important, and this is where the innovation will come from within the company. But yeah, even if you have these things, you need to make sure that it's from the lowest employee to the top employee, that I think that this culture of innovation needs to be throughout the bank as well.
Okay, Patrick, thank you for the session, for the informative information you've shared with us today. We wish you all the best in your
Thank you all
journey.
for listening.
Thank you everyone for being here today, and thank you for hosting me as well. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick and Ibtisam. I would like now to request the CEO of Oman Arab Bank, Mr. Rashad Al-Musafir, to please join us on stage to hand over a token of appreciation to our guest speaker on behalf of the bank. Please welcome him on the stage. Dear guests, on your tables, you will find a flash disk that was put in on the plate, I guess. That contains the summary of Patrick's presentation, so you might take it as a gift from the bank out of tonight's event. On behalf of Oman Arab Bank, I would like to invite each of you to join us for a delightful dinner we have prepared especially for you, coupled with live entertainment by renowned pianist Zahra Al-Yusuf. Before I sign off, I would like once again to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here today and making this event such a success. Thank you and have a relaxing evening ahead. شكرا. أتمنى لكم إن شاء الله ليلة سعيدة. شكرا.